She had one job, one simple job at the biggest event of the year, the event my girlfriend and I had spent months building from scratch. Hand out the gift bags. Ask one question. That was it. 80 people walked through that room across 2 full rotations. 80 people who were in a great mood, holding something in their hands, already inclined to say yes to the next thing. And after all of it, after every single one of those 80 people, she had 0 sign-ups. Not one, and when I walked over and asked why, she shrugged. And when I explained exactly how to do it for the third group, calmly, clearly, without any edge in my voice, she placed everything in my hands, turned around, and walked off the floor. Not quietly, not discreetly. She stormed, in front of the guests, in front of Paul's employees, in front of everyone. Here's what makes this moment so much bigger than it looks on the surface. This was the same woman who had spent weeks inserting herself into every corner of this event. She had emailed our sponsors without permission. She had accidentally torpedoed an exclusivity deal worth real money. She had spent an entire setup day contradicting every professional decision my girlfriend made. All of that energy, all of that involvement, and she couldn't manage to ask a simple question 80 times. My best friend Paul was standing right there when it all fell apart. He saw every second of it. And there was nothing left in that moment, no story, no excuse, no defense, that could change what he had just watched with his own eyes. Let me take you back to where this started. Paul and I have known each other since we were 11 years old. Middle school, 2 kids who ended up at the same lunch table and never really stopped talking after that. It sounds simple when you describe it that way, but 15 years of friendship isn't simple. It's thousands of moments, late nights, hard conversations, showing up when it was inconvenient, choosing each other over and over when life made it easy not to. By the time we were adults, we weren't just friends, we were family. And for 6 years, we actually lived together under the same roof. We shared a kitchen, a living room, years of daily life. I knew how he took his coffee. I knew how he processed bad news. I knew which things he'd laugh off and which things would quietly eat at him for weeks. That kind of intimacy doesn't happen by accident. You build it, and then you protect it. There was one conversation we kept coming back to across all those years. It was simple. One day, we'd both find the right women. We'd go on double dates every weekend. Our kids would grow up together, knowing each other the way we knew each other. We'd be uncles to each other's children. Neither of us had siblings. For Paul, it meant even more than that. He lost both of his parents. He doesn't have a family to come home to the way most people do. So the idea of building something, of taking this friendship and expanding it into something that felt like a real extended family, that wasn't sentimental talk. That was the plan. That was the thing we were both working toward. So when Paul launched his business and came to us for marketing help, I didn't hesitate. My girlfriend Sarah had spent 5 years at major companies before we started our own firm together: event planning, influencer marketing, brand relations. She was the real engine of what we'd built. She was genuinely excellent at her job. When Paul asked for help, it felt like everything was finally aligning. Best friends, building something side by side. That was the dream. That is not what happened. Let me tell you about the 2 women at the center of this story, because you need to understand both of them to understand why any of this mattered. Sarah, my girlfriend, has been with me for 3 years. She's 26. Confident, outgoing, genuinely warm. The kind of person who walks into a room and figures out how to connect with everyone in it within the first 15 minutes. Not performative, not forced, just naturally social. She is also sharp. When she commits to something professionally, she doesn't cut corners and she doesn't miss. Then there is Mia, Paul's girlfriend, 23. They've been together 5 years. She is quiet, extremely quiet. And I want to be fair here because for a long time I genuinely believed it was just her personality. I'd known her closely. She was around constantly during the years Paul and I lived together. In a real sense, I practically lived with her too. I treated her like a little sister. Her quietness was just her thing. I never questioned it. Some people are reserved, that's fine, but here's where things got complicated. When Sarah and I got serious, I pushed hard for our worlds to merge. Double dates every week for over a year. I encouraged Sarah to reach out to Mia one-on-one dinners, hangouts, afternoon plans, anything. Sarah tried. Genuinely, earnestly, repeatedly tried. She extended invitation after invitation. She showed up warm and open every single time. And every single time, Mia responded with one-word answers. In every group setting, she would attach herself entirely to Paul and leave Sarah in a conversational dead zone, no eye contact, no effort, no bridge. She declined every one-on-one invitation, every dinner. My own mother noticed and said something. Paul's own mother noticed and said something. Still, I told myself it was shyness. I made excuses. Does that sound like shyness to you? Or does it sound like a choice? Because here is what I know now, that same woman who could not manage one warm sentence to my girlfriend for 3 years, she was about to find unlimited energy for something else entirely. Here is where the story shifts from a personal frustration into something else entirely, something with real stakes and real consequences. Paul's business needed a major event. The kind that would put his company on the map, brand sponsors, influencer attendance, content creators in the room. He came to us. Sarah got to work immediately. She secured 15 brand sponsorships. She built a guest list full of genuine influence. She structured exclusivity agreements into each sponsorship deal, meaning if a coffee brand signed on, no competing coffee brand would be at that event. That's not fine print. That's how you protect the value of what you've sold your partners. It tells them their investment means something. It's the difference between a professional operation and a mess. The plan was clean, the execution was on track, and Sarah was doing what she does best. And then Mia decided she wanted to help. At first, it was small. A comment about the design here, an opinion about color palette there. The kind of input that's easy to dismiss as well-meaning if you're trying to be generous. But then it grew. She started emailing brands directly. No coordination. No awareness of what had already been negotiated. No understanding of the exclusivity agreements already in place. Just reaching out to sponsors on her own, from her own device, to the same companies or similar ones that Sarah had already approached, creating the impression from the outside that Paul's team had no idea what the left hand was doing. Think about what that looks like to a brand. You receive a carefully crafted proposal from one contact, you agree to terms, and then days later you get another email from a completely different contact asking about the same opportunity. You don't think, wow, they are enthusiastic. You think, who is actually running this operation? Is anyone in charge here? Sarah had spent weeks building professional credibility with these partners, and Mia was quietly, unknowingly, systematically undermining every bit of it. And I said nothing. I told myself the contract renewal was 2 weeks out. I'd handle it then. What I didn't know was that the most expensive damage had already been done. I want you to understand exactly what happened with the coffee brand because this is the moment where everything stopped being abstract. Paul came to me one afternoon, casual, almost proud, and mentioned that they had landed another sponsor for the event, 50% off. Good deal. He seemed pleased. I asked who had done the outreach. He said Mia. She had just been reaching out, seeing what else they could bring in. I nodded. And then I asked the only question that mattered in that moment. What kind of brand? He said coffee. I felt the bottom drop out. We had already signed a coffee brand. They had agreed to partner with this event specifically because of an exclusivity guarantee. No competing coffee brands on the floor, period. That wasn't a detail in a long contract. That was a selling point. That was why they said yes. And Mia, without asking anyone, without checking any list, without knowing any of the agreements already in place, had gone out and brought in a second coffee brand and told them they had a spot at this event. We couldn't display them. We couldn't acknowledge them. We couldn't honor the commitment Mia had made to them. The entire sponsorship was unusable. And Paul had come to me like it was good news. He was proud of her hustle. He was glad to see her motivated. And I had to stand there, in a conversation that felt like it was happening on the surface of a frozen lake, and carefully, calmly explain why this was a serious professional problem, without making it a fight, without embarrassing anyone, without turning a moment of misguided effort into a confrontation that would follow us for months. I held it together. I stayed measured. But when I got home and told Sarah what happened, the look on her face said everything I had been working too hard not to say out loud. She didn't rage. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just nodded, slowly, recalibrating her expectations for what the next few weeks were going to look like, because she already knew. She had known for a while, and so had I, if I was being honest with myself. I was just running out of ways to convince myself it wasn't as bad as it looked. 2 weeks. That's how long I had until the contract renewal. And I had already decided I was going to say something then, not a confrontation, not an ultimatum, just a professional boundary stated clearly and calmly. One point of contact, one plan, one direction for the event. That's not personal. That's just how work gets done. I had the language prepared in my head. I was going to be measured, direct, adult about it. But the setup day arrived before that conversation ever happened. We drove to the venue the day before the event. My girlfriend, her assistant, and me, prepared, clear plan, ready to work, We expected to meet Paul there. He brought Mia. Of course he did. And from the moment we started setting up, it became exactly what a month of watching this unfold should have told me it would become. Mia had opinions about everything, every table placement, every banner position, every design decision Sarah had made weeks ago and was now executing on a deadline. Not suggestions offered once and then gracefully dropped, repeated, persistent input on decisions that were already made by the person who was actually hired and qualified to make them. There was a moment I keep coming back to. I was on a ladder, hanging something from the ceiling. Sarah was below me, calling out which direction to move it based on the overall layout she had designed and knew by memory. And Mia was across the room, calling out different directions entirely, both of them telling me opposite things at the same time. I was standing on a ladder, holding a decoration I couldn't put down, caught between two voices pulling in opposite directions. I climbed down. I walked straight to Paul and said, quietly, "Too many captains. It's slowing everything down. Can you handle this?" He said he would talk to her. He did, not much changed. Sarah got through the setup day. Barely. She said something under her breath at one point, something sharp enough that I was genuinely relieved nobody else heard it, and then swallowed it and kept working. We packed up, drove home, and I looked at my girlfriend and thought, tomorrow is going to test everything. I just didn't know yet that the test was going to be failed by someone else. Event day, everything we had been building toward for months was now happening in real time. The venue looked exactly the way Sarah had envisioned it, exactly the way she had designed it despite every obstacle placed in her path. The brand displays were set. The space was polished and curated. Influencers and content creators were starting to arrive, and the whole operation was moving the way a well-designed event moves when someone who genuinely knows what they're doing has been running the logistics from day one. The format was 3 back-to-back parties, 40 guests each, rotating through the experience. Specialty coffees, matcha drinks, curated food, an atmosphere built for creating content and making connections. Clean, elevated, impressive. Exactly what Paul's business needed. And everybody had a role. Paul and his team were behind the bar making drinks. Sarah was hosting, working every corner of the room, managing the flow of 300 total guests, making introductions, representing the brand with exactly the kind of presence that makes people feel like they're somewhere worth being. That's what she was hired for. That's what she delivered. I was covering content, capturing footage, pulling clips, making sure every moment that was worth documenting got documented, which left one job open, and Mia was there. She had been there through all of it, the weeks of unauthorized emails, the setup day standoffs, the coffee brand disaster. She had wanted to be part of this. She had fought for it in every way she knew how, both professionally and personally. And I had one job left to give. It was the simplest job I had available, handing guests their gift bags at the end of each rotation and asking one question about a creator program we were launching. Was it glamorous? No. Was it critical? Absolutely. Every person in that room was a potential long-term content partner. Converting even a fraction of them in that single human moment, gift bag in hand, good experience behind them, mood at its peak, would have been a major win for Paul's business. I placed the most important soft conversion task of the entire event in the hands of the woman who had spent weeks insisting she belonged here. I gave her the chance to prove it. 2 full groups rotated through, 80 people. 80 guests who had just spent time in a space specifically designed to make them feel good. 80 people in an elevated mood, holding a branded gift bag, already having said yes to the experience by showing up. The kind of crowd that any salesperson, any marketer, any creator looking to build a network would give a lot to have standing right in front of them. I finished up the content I was capturing, handed off my camera for a minute, and made my way over to Mia as the second group was clearing out. How many sign-ups? 0. I stood there for a moment. I thought I had misunderstood or that there had been some confusion about the assignment. I asked her, had she been making a point of asking people about the program when she handed them their bags? She said no. She said people just walked out when she handed them the gift bag. I want you to really hear that answer. Not, I tried and most people seemed rushed. Not, I asked about 20 of them but lost momentum. Not, I wasn't sure how to phrase it, can you show me? Just, they walked out. So she stopped. 80 people, 2 full groups, not 1 attempt. I kept my voice completely even. I said, look, when you hand someone their bag, that is the moment. They are happy, they are holding something nice, you have their full attention for exactly 5 seconds. You use that 5 seconds. You say 1 sentence. She shrugged. After 80 people, she shrugged. And then she said something about, What am I supposed to do if they just walk out? Paul had drifted closer during this exchange. He was standing near enough to hear all of it, and I watched something move across his face, slow, reluctant, unmistakable. The kind of look that comes when you've been telling yourself a story for a long time and something finally makes it impossible to keep telling it. Because this was not someone who had tried and fallen short. This was not nerves or shyness or an honest mistake. This was someone who had spent weeks fighting for a seat at this table, through unauthorized emails, through setup day confrontations, through an exclusivity deal that cost real money, and when she finally got her seat, she didn't even pick up the fork. Paul knew it. I could see him knowing it. She handed everything to me, the remaining gift bags, the sign, the program materials. She placed all of it into my arms in one deliberate motion. Then she turned around and walked off the floor. And I want to be precise about the word I'm using here. She did not leave. She did not step away. She stormed. Back rigid, stride intentional, the unmistakable body language of someone who has decided they are done. In front of the third group of guests who were already starting to filter in front of Paul's employees who had been working this event all day, in front of everyone. I had about 30 seconds to make a decision, and I made the right one. I smiled at the first guest who caught my eye. I said something warm and genuine. I stepped into the role she had just abandoned and handled the third group myself. I got sign-ups because I asked, because asking was literally the entire job. But I want you to understand what was happening underneath that composure I was holding together in real time. This was the same woman who had been too quiet to exchange more than a one-word answer with my girlfriend across 3 years of dinners and double dates. Too reserved to accept a single invitation to a one-on-one lunch. Too shy, or so the story went, to engage in normal social conversation. But she had found unlimited energy and absolutely zero hesitation when it came to emailing our sponsors without permission. Undermining exclusivity agreements worth real money. Contradicting every professional decision during the setup day. Inserting herself into an operation she had no experience, no training, and no business being part of. That same woman, when finally given the simplest, most human, most manageable task at this entire event, could not bring herself to ask one question, and when held accountable for it gently, calmly, without hostility, she made a scene and walked out. Paul was standing right there. He saw the 0 sign-ups. He heard the shrug. He watched her walk off, and there was no version of events left that could reshape what he had just seen. The story he had been telling himself was over. The third group had a good time. I want to make sure that lands clearly. The event itself, taken as a whole, was a success in every way that actually mattered. The atmosphere worked. The brands were happy with what they saw. The content was captured. The guest experience delivered exactly what we had promised Paul it would deliver, and that was entirely because of what my girlfriend had built. Despite the unauthorized emails that had created confusion with our sponsors, despite the exclusivity deal that got blown before we even walked in the door, despite the setup day and the ceiling decorations and every obstacle placed in front of her from the moment Mia decided she wanted to be involved. Sarah had built something real. She had done her job with a professionalism that didn't waver even when everything around it was being made harder by someone who had no right to be there. After the guests cleared out, Paul and I had a real conversation. Not the kind where people dance around everything and nothing actually gets said. He apologized directly. He acknowledged his girlfriend's behavior specifically. He told me that Mia had suddenly gotten very motivated out of nowhere in the weeks leading up to the event, that she had been stuck for a while, not working, not pursuing much of anything. And when she saw what Sarah was doing, she got excited. She wanted to be involved. She wanted to prove something. And Paul admitted that he hadn't wanted to stop her because seeing her energized again felt like progress. He hadn't seen that drive in her for a long time, and he didn't want to be the one who extinguished it. I understood that. I genuinely did. When someone you love seems to be coming alive again, it is a hard thing to pump the brakes on. But there is a version of that support that helps someone grow, and there is a version that hands them a professional situation they are completely unprepared for and calls it encouragement while other people absorb the collateral. What Paul was admitting, without quite saying it directly, was that he had known. He had known she was in over her head. He had known her involvement was causing real problems. And he had let it continue because her motivation mattered more to him than the professional consequences for everyone else in the room. He said he would keep her out of it going forward. I believe he meant it, but I also know this. The tension between Sarah and Mia didn't get resolved that night. That ticking clock is still running. And those double dates Paul keeps finding reasons to suggest 6 times in the last 6 months, still asking, that tension is not going anywhere on its own. The event gave us resolution on the professional side. The personal side is still unsettled. And one day, when nobody is prepared for it, it is going to demand to be addressed. Here's what I keep coming back to, long after that event night. Paul and I built 15 years of friendship out of nothing but showing up for each other. He lost his parents. I was there. I have been there for every major moment of his adult life, and he has been there for mine. When his business needed a serious marketing partner, I didn't calculate the risk. I didn't weigh the professional complications against the friendship. I said yes, because that is what you do when your brother needs you. But here is what all of this taught me, and I think it is worth sitting with, because I suspect some of you have been in versions of this same situation. When we refuse to have the hard conversations, when we tell ourselves we're keeping the peace, protecting what matters, avoiding unnecessary drama, what we are almost always actually doing is just postponing the inevitable. Every time I stayed quiet about the unauthorized emails, I was borrowing time. Every time Paul watched Mia insert herself into our work and looked the other way because her motivation felt like progress, he was borrowing time. That borrowed time ran out on event day. And the conversation that should have happened weeks earlier, professionally, calmly, privately, had to happen instead on the floor of a live venue while guests were still in the room and Paul's employees were watching. Hard conversations, when they are genuinely necessary, do not get easier by waiting. They just get messier and more expensive. And here is the cold karma at the center of all of this. Mia spent weeks trying to prove she was indispensable to this event. She pushed herself into the emails, the planning, the design feedback, the setup day decisions. She wanted to be seen as someone who could do what Sarah does. She wanted Paul to be proud of her the way he was impressed by Sarah. She wanted to prove something. Instead, she proved the exact opposite, not through anyone's argument, not through my girlfriend venting, not through anything I said or didn't say. Through her own actions, on the most important day, in full view of the one person whose opinion mattered most. Paul saw it. He could not unsee it. He had no choice but to acknowledge it directly and clearly. And because of that, because Mia's own behavior finally made itself undeniable, my girlfriend's professionalism was validated in a way that no argument and no confrontation and no months of quiet frustration ever could have produced. Sometimes you do not have to fight for your reputation. You do the work. You stay professional when it is hard. You keep your composure when everything around you is making it difficult. And karma, cold, patient, precise, and inevitable does the rest. If this story hit somewhere real for you, hit that like button and subscribe. We post every single day. Stories about justice, about brotherhood, about the slow and satisfying moment when the truth finally becomes impossible to ignore. Stay with us.